She's jobless and pathetic. The mashed potatoes on my fork slipped and fell back into my plate. My brother Derek's voice sliced through the room like glass shattering across tile. All eyes turned toward me, some amused, some indifferent, none sympathetic. I didn't flinch. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I kept my eyes steady on the golden trim of the china plate in front of me as laughter broke out around the long oak table. My heart beat slow and steady, like it always did when I was about to make a move no one saw coming. She's just a burden we feed, my father said matter-of-factly, like he was reciting a fact about the weather. You live here rent-free, Madison. Maybe it's time to accept you're not cut out for the real world. I looked up. My mother nodded with a tight-lipped smile, sipping her wine like she wasn't helping drive a dagger through her only daughter. My sister-in-law, Hannah, laughed behind her hand, and even Derek's teenage son grinned from across the table. They thought they knew the script. They thought I'd sit there, maybe protest weekly, maybe leave the table with a tearful retreat like last Thanksgiving. But this wasn't last Thanksgiving. This time, I came prepared. I reached slowly into the side of my purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. Clean, crisp, unassuming. But inside, it held the very thing that would unravel the illusion they'd wrapped themselves in for years. I stood. They didn't stop laughing. God, here we go again, Derek groaned. Another sad resume? Maybe a rejection letter this time? Don't embarrass yourself, Maddie. I laid the envelope down on the table. No, I said quietly but firmly. This is the deed. They went silent. Every single face around the table froze. The deed to this house, I clarified. As of 3 hours ago, it's not yours anymore. My husband, Ethan, stepped through the archway just then, right on cue. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer, calm as ever, he placed a slim leather folder beside the envelope. Title transfer went through. Notarized and recorded, he said smoothly. The house now belongs to Madison. Fully paid. No liens. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. The room was dead silent. You could hear the wind brushing against the window panes, the steady ticking of the antique grandfather clock behind Derek, and the way my father's breath hitched ever so slightly as he stared at the envelope like it might burn him. I don't understand, my mother whispered, eyes darting between Ethan and me like we were ghosts. What do you mean she owns the house? I bought it from the bank, Ethan said. Your mortgage was 5 months delinquent. We paid it off. The house was transferred under her name today. So, technically, you're all guests in her home now. My father's face turned a deep, unfamiliar shade of red. That's absurd. That's legal. I cut in. And binding. Derek's fork clattered onto his plate. Why would you? What kind of game is this? I stepped forward slowly, my voice low but every syllable cutting deeper than any scream could. The kind where you stop laughing at the person you call a burden. Because she just bought the roof over your head. I paused, letting that hang heavy in the air. I spent 5 years working nights. I built a freelance business while you mocked me for not having a real job. I got married last year. None of you showed up. And Ethan's the CEO of that same pathetic little startup you all said would crash and burn. We didn't crash. We scaled. You lied to us, my mother whispered, clutching the back of her chair. No, I said. You just never bothered to ask the truth. The silence around the table was now drenched in humiliation, denial, and something else they didn't know how to process. Fear. Because everything they thought they knew about me just collapsed. I turned and looked at Ethan. Let's give them time to let it sink in. As we walked out of the room, I didn't look back. But I could feel the weight of every eye, every stunned breath behind me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the joke at the table. I was the one flipping it. The sound of the heavy door clicking shut behind me was the most satisfying music I'd ever heard. Ethan and I walked down the marble foyer like we weren't just guests in that house for 10 years. Because we weren't anymore. That place, The place where I'd cried alone in a cold basement room, where my parents made me feel like a freeloader, where Derek called me a mistake, was finally mine. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice low as he opened the French doors to the back patio. The evening air was cool against my skin, but I was burning inside. Not from rage. From clarity. I turned to him and smiled faintly. "I'm okay. Better than I've been in years." Inside, the muffled sound of frantic voices grew louder. Footsteps stomped across the tile. I imagined my father pacing with clenched fists, my mother trying to dial lawyers she couldn't afford anymore, and Derek trying to figure out what just hit him. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. This was the house where I learned how to swallow humiliation like water, where my dreams were laughed at over meatloaf dinners, where I was called a failure for not choosing a normal life. They'd never asked what I wanted, only reminded me what I wasn't. Until tonight. The door slammed open behind us. "You can't do this," Derek barked, striding onto the patio like he still had authority. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "There's no way this is legal. You can't just buy the house and throw us out." Ethan didn't flinch. "You should check your mortgage contract. Clause 14. If you default for more than 90 days, the bank can foreclose." Which they did. Then we bought it. Cash. Derek's eyes darted to me. "You planned this." "I earned this," I said quietly. "And don't worry, I'm not kicking you out. Yet." He scoffed. "You don't have the guts." I took a step closer. "You don't get to measure my strength anymore. You don't even get a vote." He looked back toward the house, then at Ethan, then down at his shoes. "You're bluffing," he muttered. Ethan pulled out his phone and tapped a few times. "The documents are public record now. Want me to send you the link?" Derek didn't answer. He just stormed back inside, cursing under his breath. I sat down on the edge of the patio bench, my heart slowly returning to a steady rhythm. Ethan sat beside me and placed a hand on mine. "You did it," he said. "Not just the house. All of it. You faced them." I nodded. "I thought it would feel like revenge. But it feels like release." He smiled. "That's the best kind." Just then, the back door opened again. This time, it was my mother. She didn't yell. She didn't throw accusations. She just stood there, shoulders hunched, makeup smudged, the mask of superiority cracked all over her face. "Madison," she said, like saying my name hurt. "You should have told us. About the business. About your husband. About all this." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked, "Would you have listened?" Silence. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She just looked at me with that same blank confusion I'd seen in her eyes since I was 10, when I got a science fair medal and she said, "Don't get your hopes up." "I didn't tell you," I continued, "because you never wanted to believe I could succeed. You were more comfortable thinking of me as the family's cautionary tale." Her hands curled into fists. "That's not true. You let them mock me," I said. "You joined in. You wanted a daughter who smiled quietly, took the blame, stayed small." I tried. "But I'm not small. Not anymore." Her face twisted. "So what now? You humiliate us in return? That's what this is." "No," I said. "This is me reclaiming the power you never thought I deserved." She stood frozen, trying to summon some maternal line, some deflection. But there was nothing left to throw at me. "Good night, Mom," I said gently. "Make sure everyone's out of the basement by morning. I'll be changing the locks." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just got up and walked past her into the night air. Because the girl they used to push down didn't need to raise her voice anymore. The basement was quiet. Too quiet. I stood at the top of the stairs the next morning, watching the sun flood through the small ground-level windows, catching dust in the air like little ghosts of the past. This used to be my room. Cold concrete floor. Mismatched furniture. A cot instead of a bed. A heater that barely worked during winter. Derek and his family had taken over the upstairs guest suites. Me? I was lucky to be allowed a roof, they used to say. But this morning everything had changed. The locks were changed. The deed was in my safe. and the power had shifted in a way no one could reverse. I took slow, measured steps down the stairs. In my hand was a folder, neatly labeled, a bomb wrapped in paper. "Hey!" Derek barked when I stepped into the basement. "You can't just walk in here." I looked around. They had covered my old bed with their luggage. His wife Hannah was brushing her hair in front of a plastic mirror. Their son sat on a suitcase, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice the tension crawling up the walls. "Morning," I said calmly. "You were supposed to be out by now." Derek narrowed his eyes. "You're seriously kicking us out?" "I'm giving you the same respect you gave me," I replied. "But I also came to give you this." I dropped the folder onto the coffee table. He didn't open it. "What's this? More legal threats?" "No," I said. "Truth." Hannah, curious despite herself, reached over and pulled the folder open. Her fingers stopped mid-flip. Her eyes froze. It wasn't just legal forms. It was evidence. Credit card statements, loan defaults, medical bills, foreclosure warnings, even a letter from a private lender threatening legal action. "You went through our stuff?" Derek asked, suddenly defensive. "No," I said. "You left it all on the cloud. Unprotected. I didn't hack anything. I just looked. Like any bank would. Like any investor would." He turned pale. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. "To humiliate me?" "I'm doing this," I said, stepping closer, "to make it clear why I had to take the house. You weren't just cruel to me. You were destroying everything around you. You were days from losing this place anyway." I locked eyes with him. "But instead of helping me when I was broke, you used me as a shield. You let the family point at me so they wouldn't look at you." Derek collapsed into the couch, his face hollow. Hannah quietly picked up the papers and started packing. There was no shouting, no begging, just a slow unraveling. The realization that everything they built on pride and lies had already cracked. I'd just shown them the light. As I walked out of the basement, I passed my mother in the hallway. She didn't speak. She just looked at me, really looked, and something shifted in her eyes. Not warmth, not regret, but maybe for the first time, respect. I stepped outside. Ethan was waiting by the car. "How'd it go?" he asked gently.
"They're packing," I said.
No threats. No drama. Just silence. He smiled. "Sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can give them." I nodded. Because for years, they filled the house with noise, mocking, shouting, commanding, laughing at pain. But now, the silence was mine. The peace was mine.
And it was deafening.
By Monday morning, the story had already traveled. Not to the news. Not to some gossip column. But where it mattered most, the community. The local real estate agent called asking if we wanted to sell. Old high school classmates began sliding into my DMs, suddenly so proud of me. And worst of all, family friends who once crossed the street to avoid me now sent carefully worded messages like, "Your dad didn't mean it that way, sweetie." Families argue.
No.
Families argue. Mine humiliated me. And now, their false version of the story had no room to breathe. I ignored the calls. I ignored the flattery. But I couldn't ignore the knock on my door late that evening. I opened it and blinked. "Hi, Maddie," said Jason Kane. Of all people. High school golden boy. Son of my father's closest friend. The guy who once made a joke about me being the family's forgotten puzzle piece, loud enough for the cafeteria to hear. He looked older now. Humbled. Dressed in a well-worn jacket instead of the flashy designer things he used to flaunt. I crossed my arms. "Did you get lost on the way to someone else's success?" He winced but didn't walk away. I deserved that. I leaned against the doorframe. "Why are you here?" "I work in commercial real estate now. And I heard what happened. And I saw your name on the title register." He looked down. "You always said you wanted to build something of your own, not just inherit scraps." I said nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook.
"This is dumb, maybe.
But I've got a proposal. There's a property downtown, old event hall. Needs someone with vision. And the way you flipped the script with your family? That's vision. My chest tightened slightly. I hated that part of me felt tempted. And yet, why are you really here? I asked, eyes narrowing. He looked up, and for once, the smirk was gone. Just sincerity. Because I spent years laughing at you, Madison, he said. Because everyone else did. But you turned everything upside down. And watching you do it made me realize I've wasted half my life trying to impress people who don't matter. Silence. Don't flatter me now, I said slowly. I'm not your redemption arc. No, he said, stepping back. You're your own. And that's why I showed up. He left the notebook on the doorstep and turned around without waiting for a response. Inside, I sat on the staircase, the same one where I used to cry quietly so no one heard. And I opened the notebook. Hand-drawn plans. Property listing. Financial model. His contact card tucked in between the pages. Ethan stepped in, carrying coffee. What's that? I showed him. It's the first time someone saw me as capable without being shocked by it. He nodded. You going to take it? I don't know, I said. But I'm not scared of building anymore. Because the girl who once apologized for dreaming too loud now owned the roof over everyone's heads. And for the first time, people were listening without interrupting. 2 weeks later, the house no longer felt like a battleground. The laughter that once mocked me had faded from the walls. The judgment that used to follow my footsteps had been swept out with the old furniture. The air was lighter.
Still. Free.
Derek and his family left the next morning after the basement confrontation. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just silence. A silence I didn't fill. My mother moved in with her sister 3 towns over. She left a single note behind on the kitchen table. Maybe we got it wrong. But we were scared. And you became something we didn't recognize. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't doing this for their understanding anymore. I sat on the front porch that afternoon, the one my father used to ban me from when real company came over. Now I watched the sun stretch across the neighborhood, wondering what legacy looked like. Not the one you inherit, the one you build. Ethan sat beside me with his laptop open. Jason emailed again, he said. What's he want this time? He said the investors he mentioned are interested. But they'll only go forward if you lead the project. I raised a brow. Why? Ethan smiled. Because they're not blind. They know when someone flips a narrative like that, she's got more than grit. She's got command. I looked out at the lawn. This place was never meant to be my prison. But I'd let it cage me for too long. All the bitterness, the humiliation, the quiet screams into my pillow, they built this fire in me. I didn't know it then, but I was always meant to burn brighter than their shadows. Tell him I'll meet them, I said. But on my terms. Just then, a familiar sound echoed through the yard. An engine. Old. Rumbling. I stood as my father's pickup pulled into the driveway. He got out slowly. Looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He didn't bring a box of demands this time.
Or a speech.
Just a folded envelope in his hand. I didn't come to fight, he said. Or explain. Then why are you here? I asked. To say this house always should have been yours, he muttered. And I was too proud to believe my daughter could outgrow me. I stared at him. The man who once told me my ideas were childish nonsense. Who called me a waste of space behind closed doors. Are you apologizing? I asked. He looked up. Eyes tired.
No.
I'm confessing. He handed me the envelope and walked back to his truck. I opened it. Inside were faded childhood drawings I thought he'd thrown away. Business flyers from the first freelancing jobs I printed in secret. A worn photo of me in my cap and gown, the day no one came to my graduation. He'd kept it all. I sat down in the grass, the paper trembling in my hands. Ethan kneeled beside me. You okay? I don't know what to feel, I whispered. But I think this was the closure I didn't even know I needed. He took my hand. You ready to move forward? I looked at the house, my house, one last time. No, I said softly. I'm ready to build something better.